Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Shata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Shata Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Adi Gaura Bhaktarinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Goshyama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Mathura Vrindavana Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mayi Ki Jai Yamuna Mayi Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, seeing as today is the appearance day of Sri Vikreshwara Pandit, I'm just going to read a short excerpt from this Samadhis, Gaudiya Vaishnava Samadhis in Vrindavan, and then we'll speak on the Bhagavatam. So Sri Vikreshwara Pandit. Once in the house of Srivas Thakur, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sang while Vikreshwara Pandit danced in constant ecstasy for 72 hours. At that time, Lord Chaitanya said, "Vikreshwara, I have only one wing like you, but if I had another, certainly I would fly in the sky." Expert at singing and dancing, Vikreshwara Pandit always pleased Lord Chaitanya with his service in the Navadvip Sankirtan parties, which he joined from the beginning, the dramas at Srivasangam, and the early Ratha Yatra at Jagannath Puri. Vrindavan Das Thakur said, "To awaken the sleeping souls in the age of Kali, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to distribute the nectar of the holy name of Krishna. When he came, the kol, mridanga, and kartal sounded like thundering clouds. Absorbed in moods of ecstatic love and shouting, 'Haribol, Haribol,' Sri Gauranga told everyone to chant the holy name of Krishna. Raising his golden arms to the sky, Lord Gauda Hari would dance in ecstasy. At that time, Vikreshwara Pandit and others would dance with the Lord." Unquote from Chaitanya Bhagavat. By Vikreshwara Pandit's blessings, Devananda Pandit was freed from the Vaishnava aparad he committed against Srivas Pandit. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted Devananda Pandit as one of his own devotees. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu commented on this incident. Quote, "Krishna has made his home in the heart of Vikreshwara Pandit. As Krishna dances in his heart, so Vikreshwara Pandit himself dances. Whatever place Vikreshwara Pandit blesses with his association becomes a holy place of pilgrimage more sacred than all the holy places. Certain great devotees such as Vikreshwara Pandit, Paramananda Puri, Swarup Damodar, Gadadhar, Jagadananda Pandit, Shankara, Raghunath Vaidya, and Raghunath Das were associating with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from the beginning of his pastimes in Navadvip. They also faithfully served the Lord when he moved to Nilachala Dham, Jagannath Puri. Vikreshwara Pandit established deities of Sri Sri Radha Kanta in Kashi Mishra's house next to the Gambhira in Jagannath Puri. Kavi Karnapur says, Vikreshwara Pandit is an incarnation of Aniruddha of the Chaturvyuha. Vikreshwara Pandit initiated Gopal Guru Goswami and many others in Orissa. Dhyan Chandra, a disciple of Gopal Guru Goswami, says in his books that Vikreshwara Pandit is an incarnation of Tungavidya Sakhi, an expert singer and dancer, serving as one of Srimati Radharani's Ashtasakis. His samadhi is in the 64 Samadhis area. Sri Vikreshwara Pandit Ki Jai. Okay, so now we'll read from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 15, text number 4. Yatha dhanasu vai dhanam bhavanti na bhavanti cha evam bhutani bhuteshu choditanisha mayaya yatha dhanasu vaidhana bhavanti na bhavanti cha evam bhutani bhuteshu choditani shamayaya yatha dana suvedhana bhavanti na bhavanti cha evam bhutani bhuteshu choditani shamayaya yatha dhana suvedhana bhavanti na bhavanti cha evam bhutani bhuteshu choditani shamayaya Not the juice? Yatha, just as. Dhanasu, through seeds of paddy. Vai, indeed. Dhanaha, grains. Bhavanti, are generated. Na, not. Bhavanti, are generated. Cha, also. Evam, in this way. Bhutani, the living entities. Bhuteshu, and other living entities. Choditani, impelled. Ishamayaya, by the potency or power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. When seeds are sown in the ground, they sometimes grow into plants and sometimes do not. Sometimes the ground is not fertile, and the sowing of seeds is unproductive. Similarly, sometimes a prospective father, being impelled by the potency of the Supreme Lord, can beget a child, but sometimes conception does not take place. Therefore, one should not lament over the artificial relationship of parenthood, which is ultimately controlled by the Supreme Lord. Purport. Maharaj Chitraketu was actually not destined to beget a son. Therefore, although he married hundreds and thousands of wives, all of them proved barren, and he could not beget even one child. When Angira Rishi came to see the king requested the great sage to enable him to have at least one son. Because of the blessing of Angira Rishi, a child was sent by the grace of Maya, but the child was not to live for long. Therefore, in the beginning, Angira Rishi told the king that he would beget a child who would cause jubilation and lamentation. King Chitraketu was not destined to get a child by providence or the will of the Supreme. Just as sterile grain cannot produce more grain, A sterile person, by the will of the Supreme Lord, cannot beget a child. Sometimes a child is born even to an impotent father and sterile mother, and sometimes a potent father and fertile mother are childless. Indeed, sometimes a child is born despite contraceptive methods, and therefore the parents kill the child in the womb. In the present age, killing children in the womb has become a common practice. Why? When contraceptive methods are taken, why don't they act? Why is a child sometimes produced so that the father and mother have to kill it in the womb? We must conclude that our arrangement of so-called scientific knowledge cannot determine what will take place. What is enacted actually depends on the Supreme Will. It is by the Supreme Will that we are situated in certain conditions in terms of family, community, and personality. These are all arrangements of the Supreme Lord according to our desires under the spell of Maya, illusion. In devotional life, therefore, one should not desire anything, since everything depends on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadyanavratam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktiruttama. One should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. One should act only to develop Krishna consciousness. For everything else, one should fully depend upon the Supreme Person. We should not create plans that will ultimately make us frustrated. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupakadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gunun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're continuing our narration here of the King Chitraketu's lamentation. So now Maharaj Chitraketu's son, who he tried so hard to obtain, went through so much mental disturbance to obtain, he's now left his body, and Narada Muni and Angira Muni have showed up on the scene and are instructing Maharaj Chitraketu, and in turn also everybody else who was there, lamenting over the death of the child, about the actual situation. Basically showing them the lesson in all of this. So that's a little bit of background. So Jiva Goswami in one place says that everybody is looking for priti. Priti can be translated as we translate it as pleasure, love, happiness, kindness. So everybody's looking for these things. And why are they looking for these things? They're looking for these things because they're a kind of shield or a kind of refuge against suffering. People are trying to avoid suffering. And it's also safe. It also feels very safe. Like, for example, if you take like the example of love, when a person is with somebody that they love, they feel very safe. They feel very sheltered. And often, you see people sometimes in public, with their significant other, and it's like they have a bubble around them. and they're, I mean, sometimes, of course, they act in ways that you think that they don't know that they're in public or something like that. But they actually do kind of feel that way. It feels like there's this bubble around them. They feel sheltered. They feel safe with that other person. So this is the natural state, or you could say this is a perverted reflection of the natural state of the soul, of the Atma. The soul experiences happiness, experiences that shelter and that safety in relation to Krishna. And in the liberated stage, this doesn't change. This is something that's fixed, like a sthai bhav. It's a constant feeling. It's a constant thing that's there with the in the liberated state. So this is because the soul is an eternal Shakti, or is an eternal energy of Krishna. Krishna has three main energies. He has the Bahiranga Shakti, the external energy, which is the material world. And that external energy, that material world, is being maintained and manifested by the Tatastha Shakti, or the living entities. Aparayamitastvanyam prakritim vidhime param jiva bhuta mahabaho yayayam dharyate jagat. That the living entities are that which is maintaining this world. It's Krishna's marginal energy. And then Krishna has his Swarup Shakti, or his internal energy, which manifests his Lila and the spiritual world and all of his expansions and associates. So because the jiva's tatastha Shakti, because it's marginal, it has the option, every living being, and including the Lord himself, the Lord uses his different Shaktis to act. So for example, the Lord has his Samvit Shakti. Samvit Shakti manifests the paraphernalia in the spiritual world, the different objects in the spiritual world, and is the basis upon which you could say Krishna's spiritual existence lies. Of course, his existence is not like conditional. It's not like at some point he exists and at some point he doesn't. But Prabhupada describes it in this way. And so similarly, the living entity also uses different Shaktis to act. For example, it's described that intrinsic to the soul is something called Jnana Shakti, by which the soul knows things. It's basically the ability or the power by which the soul can know something. So the living entity being Tatastha Shakti, he has the option that he can act with the Swarup Shakti, or he can act with the Maya Shakti. He has the choice to act with those two things. So within the realm of those two different Shaktis, Jiva Goswami describes that there's higher and lower forms of the same Shaktis. So for instance, there's a spiritual Jnana Shakti, by which the soul can understand Krishna and understand his relationship with Krishna. And then there's a Jnana Shakti within the realm of Maya, by which the soul can know so many things within the material world and forget Krishna. So the soul has a choice to act with the Swarup Shakti or to act within the Maya Shakti. And when the soul acts with the Swarup Shakti, that's called Bhakti. And that's the soul's natural state. And everything within the realm of that activity is for Krishna's pleasure, Krishnendriya Priti. It's for the pleasure of Krishna's senses, Krishna's Kaviraj describes. And then when the soul is acting within the Maya Shakti and uses those Shaktis for activity, then that produces a conditioned state by which the soul is trying to satisfy his own senses. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami also describes this state as Krishna Buli She Jeev Anadir Bahir Mukh Ataiva Mayatare Deya Shamshara Duk. So the living entity, who is Krishna's eternal energy, due to his Krishna Buli, due to forgetting Krishna, Anadir Bahirmukh, from time immemorial, he enters into this material world, and Maya gives him all kinds of different miseries. There's practically unlimited miseries that one can experience. And so Maharaj Chitraketu, in this particular pastime, he's definitely experiencing one of those miseries. He tried so very hard and went through so much mental turmoil in order to obtain this son. And despite his efforts and despite all the different arrangements he was trying to make, still, it didn't happen. It wasn't going to happen. Because, like this verse is describing, he was a sterile grain. You can't grow, anything from a sterile grain. You can't, if you have like a seed or something like that that's just sterile, it's not going to grow. No matter how much you water it, you can feed it, it's not going to grow. So this is the situation of the material world in general. No matter how hard you try to find happiness, to find priti, to find love or satisfaction, it's not going to happen, because the material world itself is a place, it's not designed like that. It's, like Krishna says, Krishna created the world and he labels it Dukkhalayam Ashashvatam. So, just like if you have for example, if you buy a piece of furniture or something, from IKEA, you have to assemble it. So if you get this, let's say you buy a dresser, or let's say you buy a table, or a dresser is probably a better example. It's probably a little. So you get a dresser and you have all the parts there for a dresser, and you say, okay, I'm going to build a chair. But it's not going to work. The pieces aren't there. It's just not going to line up. It's not going to work out. You may get something that resembles a chair, and you may try to sit on it, but because the parts of the thing aren't made to be a chair, it's likely going to fall apart. And it's not really going to work as a chair, or at least it's going to be really uncomfortable. All the, whatever, the parts that make it slide and things like that. It's just not going to work. So if you look at the instruction manual, you can understand the actual nature of those parts, the actual nature of the thing that you have. Because somebody created that thing, and therefore knows exactly what to do with it. And so he's given instructions. So Krishna, he's created the world. And within the instruction manual, he's labeled it Dukkhalayam Ashashvatam. He's labeled it as temporary and miserable. So it seems like an unintelligent proposition to try to make it into something it's not. To try to make it into a place of happiness when Krishna says it's a place of misery. So, but still people are trying very hard. Matirna Krishna paratasvato va mitobe padyeta grahavratanam adanta gobir vishatam tamisram punaf punash charvata charvananam. That people who are very determined, who've made a vrata, a griha vrata, a vrata to, or a vow, or a resolve to try to enjoy this material world. Whether somebody tries to give him good advice, or whether he may even have a thought, some super soul may inspire him with some good thought. He doesn't listen. It doesn't occur to him that this material world is actually a place of suffering, and that all of his plans are going to ultimately be foiled. And so, therefore, because he can't control his senses, because he has all these different desires that are pushing him in different directions, manoratenasati dhavato. His mind is like a chariot, which is carrying him all. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, I'm forgetting the Bengali now, but then one song, yeah, Habudu. He says in one place that, Deva Danava Manava Pashu Patanga Kita Hoye Sharge Narake Bhutale Firi Anitya Asha Loye. that my annitya asha, my temporary desires, my desires for that which is temporary, are dragging me up and down through the material world, sometimes in heaven, sometimes in hell, sometimes returning here, and in different species of life, sometimes as a demigod, sometimes as a danava, sometimes as an animal, as an insect, a bird. And so he says, my annitya asha loye, it literally means my temporary desires are taking me. So these desires, the material desires of the living entity that he develops due to his conditioned nature, they drag him all around. And of course, the example is given in the Bhagavad Gita. It's like you have these uncontrolled horses, these crazy horses that are just dragging you all over the place. But still, although they try so hard, making all different arrangements, philosophizing, and spending millions of dollars, trying to make some, and to their credit they have, trying to make technological advancement and different health techniques or mental techniques, meditation techniques to try to make this material world an enjoyable place, or at least to not make it a miserable place. Still, no matter how much they try, it's like trying to grow a sterile grain or trying to plant a seed that's just not going to grow. It's just not arranged like that. And even if you do find some way, because you could say, some people can make the argument, oh, well, this guy looks pretty happy, or this guy looks pretty happy, he seems like he's got it made. And it's true, there is, to some extent, you can make the material energy respond. You do certain things, and the material energy might respond and give you a seemingly favorable situation. Even in that stage, or even if somebody gets to that point, still, it's temporary. You're not going to be able to stay in that situation for very long. And when it's over, like Maharaj Chitraketu, he asked Angira Rishi for the son. Angira Rishi gave him this son, and he said, but this son, he's going to cause jubilation and lamentation. And Maharaj Chitraketu said, anyway, it's okay. We'll deal with that when it comes. And of course, he also naturally thought that it wouldn't be as bad as it was. He thought maybe he'll just be disobedient. Maybe he'll just be kind of a naughty boy. So anyway, it's worth it. So this is what people are thinking. They're thinking, there's such phrases as you take the good with the bad, or every cloud has a silver lining, or something like that. But it often is much worse than people think it's going to be. And therefore, they suffer a lot, despite their elaborate arrangements for happiness. Therefore, what Prabhupada is emphasizing in this purport is that one should just give up the whole thing. Just give up the whole effort or the endeavor of trying to enjoy this material world, because it's a lost cause. It's not going to work. Like there's that. It's a lost cause. It's not going to work. So some people, even who are still conditioned by the modes of material nature, they get some kind of idea like this. There are certain, you could say, like sattvic people who have ideas about this, that people talk about the rat race, or people talk about so many things. Even some people talk about the soul. Of course, they don't really know exactly what the soul is, but they do talk about it. But without Krishna, without knowledge of Krishna consciousness and engaging in one's relationship with Krishna, then they're bound to fall back into Maya. And actually, they never even really left Maya in the first place. Jiva Goswami says that knowledge of the soul as separate from the body is in sattva. He says that's sattvic knowledge. That one who has that knowledge is in sattva. But sattva is still a mode of material nature. So they're still conditioned by the modes of material nature. And it's only a matter of time until rajas dominates or tamas dominates, because that's the nature of the modes of material nature. They just fluctuate like that. So even if one's in goodness, at some point he'll have to fall back into tamas, or he'll have to fall back into rajas. That's just the natural movement of the material world. So there's a verse in the Padma Purana, Dasa bhuto hare eva nanya seva kadachana, that the living entity, this is described in relation to the 21 intrinsic characteristics of the jiva, that one of them is Dasa bhuto hare eva nanya seva kadachana, that the soul is a servant of Hari and nobody else. Nan-yasyaiva kadachana. So there's no in-between state. There's no, I'm not in Maya, but I'm not a devotee. There's no in-between state between the Maya Shakti, like I was saying, and the Swarup Shakti. You're either here or you're there. And so those who think that they're, like there's this verse, Yenyeda vindakshava muktamaninas tvayasta bhavad avishuddha buddhayaha aruhya kritshrena parampadam tatav patantido nadrata yushmad angreha. That those who think that they're at the topmost level, but who have no regard for the lotus feet of Krishna, they have to fall down deeper into the modes of material nature, because that's what Maya means. Maya means suffering. Maya she has two potencies. She has the covering potency and the throwing potency. So if one is within the realm of Maya, within the modes of material nature, then naturally at one point he'll have to be covered and he'll have to be thrown. And of course there's different degrees of this. It's not like, So this pastime in the Bhagavatam is demonstrating how the living entity can get out of this, namely by associating with a sadhu like Angira Rishi. You can imagine how this would have gone, how this pastime would have gone if Angira Rishi hadn't come to, you could say, instruct, or Narada Muni also, it hadn't come to instruct Maharaj Chitraketu and the lamenting family there. What would have happened? They would have just been absolutely devastated. Even maybe some of them would even have given up their lives because they were so, you can, just upon reading the previous section where it was talking about how desperately Maharaj Chitraketu was lamenting, it was very intense. So, but what would have happened? Nothing really. They would have just lamented, and maybe some of them would have gotten over it, maybe some of them wouldn't have. And nothing, they would have just continued on with their material lives. Perhaps even with redoubled enthusiasm to try to get a child. So there's a verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Brahmanda Brahmite Kon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. So by associating with after wandering in the material world for a very, very long time, by good fortune, the conditioned soul gets to associate with a sadhu, and by that sadhu's mercy, by the association of that devotee, one develops faith, one develops shraddha. And it's described that there's two different kinds of shraddha. There's lokiki shraddha and there's shastriya shraddha. So lokiki shraddha is faith which is based on one's conditioning. So for example, if one has lokiki shraddha, then when one sees the devotees, he may think, oh, this is just some cult, or this is some Indian religion, or for example, if they're born in India and they have Indian conditioning, they may say, oh, this is my childhood religion, or this is... So they're seeing the world, and they're seeing, in turn, Krishna consciousness and Krishna in relation to themselves. And then there's Shastriya Shraddha, which is faith based on the statements of Shastra, based on the conception of Shastra. And Jiva Goswami, in his commentary on this verse, Brahmanda Brahmite Kon Bhagavan Jeev, he says that the Bhakti Lata Bij, or the seed of Bhakti, which one obtains by the mercy of a sadhu, is that Shastriya Shraddha. So by the mercy of a sadhu, we can see Krishna and we can see the process of Krishna consciousness as it actually is. And when we do that, we can develop a great amount of faith and determination to engage in that process. Because if we're seeing it according to Shastra, what does Shastra say about worshiping Krishna? What does Shastra say about chanting the holy name, about engaging in the process of Krishna Bhakti? It says that there's no process which is higher than this, that there's no other process by which one can attain happiness. So if one has faith like this, if one has faith in these statements of Shastra and one sees the process of Krishna consciousness according to these statements, then it's very easy to have determination. It's very easy to have determination if you see the process of Krishna consciousness as the only way out, as the only way to obtain any actual, real, substantial happiness. And so how the sadhu imparts the Bhakti Lata Bij onto the living entity is described by Srila Prabhupada in his purport to this verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. How this Shastriya Shraddha is transferred. Prabhupada said that the Bhakti Lata Bij is the methods and regulations by which one is perfectly trained in devotional service. So by perfectly engaging, not just engaging, but by perfectly engaging in the process of Krishna consciousness under the example and the guidance of a sadhu, then we'll naturally develop faith. We'll naturally develop this Shastriya Shraddha, this faith according to Scripture, because we'll see that the process actually works. So by engaging, not just engaging, but like I said, by perfectly engaging, means with perfect determination, with perfect, without, misconceptions. Of course, weakness of heart may be there, and it may not be perfect in that sense. But having the perfect conception and having perfect guidance and having the perfect example, then by engaging like this, we can see that the process will feel the effect. We'll feel the effect of Krishna consciousness, and in this way we'll develop faith to continue. But Prabhupada continues in his purport that this development of faith depends on the satisfaction of the spiritual master, depends on the satisfaction of the sadhu who's bestowing it. And he says that unless one satisfies him, unless one pleases him, then one may get the seed, but like this verse is saying, it might be like a sterile seed. He says that one may get the root cause, but not the benefit of devotional service, which in other words means that we retain our lokika shraddha. We retain our material conceptions. We retain our material faith. And so therefore we'll see Krishna consciousness not as it actually is, but as our conditioned minds think it is. And so therefore we see people that they leave Krishna consciousness and they say, or they engage in it, but they think they're just trying it out, or they're just seeing it as maybe a part of their life, not as the purpose of their life, or just another way to get free from stress or something like that. And so by not getting this benefit of devotional service like Prabhupada is saying, then we'll have to become attracted by Maya. We'll become attracted by Maya because we'll lose attraction for the process of Krishna consciousness. Because according to the material conception of life, the process of Krishna consciousness is not very enjoyable. One has to, in order to enjoy the process of Krishna consciousness, in the sense of maintaining one's determination to continue, then one has to develop a certain amount of taste. And this taste is not just like it has to be obtained, like Prabhupada is saying, from the pleasure of the spiritual master and from the pleasure of Krishna. And otherwise, we'll always be attracted to Maya. We'll always fall down. We'll always we'll just keep rotating in the cycle of birth and death, and we'll never manifest our true nature by which we can really be satisfied. There's a verse, I think, in the Chandogya Upanishad, if I'm remembering correctly, that Prabhupada quotes sometimes. Rasam hye vayam labdvanandi bhavati. That upon attaining the Lord, who is rasa, rasam hye vayam labdvanandi bhavati, then the conditioned soul becomes extremely blissful. And Baladev Vidyabhushana mentions this in his commentary on one verse in the Vedanta Sutra, Svena Rupena Binishpadyate, that when one attains their natural form in relationship with Krishna, then he experiences satisfaction, and he experiences, and it's described that he plays. So that's the goal of the process of Krishna consciousness, is that we're trying to go back to our true form, our actual real form in the spiritual world with Krishna. We're trying to develop an attraction to the spiritual world. We're trying to develop an investment, an emotional investment in Krishna consciousness. And in order to do this, we have to associate with the devotees who have that emotional investment, who have that determination and that faith, because they can bestow it upon us. And then, so we want to lose our attraction for Maya. We want to lose our tendency to make plans, to try to enjoy this material world. And like Prabhupada is saying, just fully depend, anyabhilashita shunyam, no other desires, just fully depend on the Supreme Personality of Godhead for our maintenance. And so when we reach the state, then the natural condition, or the constitutional position of the soul is manifest, and he experiences great satisfaction. So it's 8:35. I'll stop there if there's any discussion, or if there's not.
Thank you for the nice class. You were saying that if Chitraketu just endured and tolerated this desire to have a son, then it will be just temporary and go away. But sometimes we see that the desire to have something is so strong that if people don't get it, even if they're practicing devotional life, they begin to lament, or sometimes they hold grudges for like a long time. So what would you say be the most effective solution and position of such a person in that way?
Yeah, well, one thing is I don't think I said that. I don't think I said that if Maharaj Chitraketu just tolerated his desire, then it would go away. What I said was that if Maharaj, or if Angira Muni hadn't showed up on the scene to instruct him, and give him spiritual knowledge, then he would have lamented, and he would have just continued on with his material life, and nothing would have changed. So and I actually even said that he may even continue his material life with redoubled, I think it said enthusiasm to continue to try to have a child. So the nature of lust is that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, is that it burns like fire and it's never satisfied. So there's a particular, I guess this is Freudian. I'm not so well versed in these different things, but I think it's Freud who said that if you just indulge your desires like anything, well, Osho also said that, that basically suffering is due to like repression of desire, and I think Freud often emphasized specifically like sexual desire, and Osho also, I think Osho's thing was, you just enjoy like anything, and then eventually your desires will just go away. So we don't subscribe to that philosophy. And so my advice to somebody who is going through something is, tolerance is there. You should tolerate, like Krishna says, Matar sparshastu konteya shitoshna sukha dukkha. You should tolerate happiness and distress and not be disturbed. But the only way that you can practically do that is by taking to Krishna consciousness, because otherwise there's no process as powerful for controlling the mind and controlling the senses as Krishna consciousness, because it's a completely comprehensive alternative and a satisfying alternative to the material conception of life. So while still, if one still maintains their material conception of life, then naturally they won't be satisfied, because the material conception of life is Ishvaro Hamaham Bhogi, that I'm the controller and that I'm the enjoyer. So one's never going to be happy by maintaining that conception, and so one has to give it up by the process of Krishna consciousness, like Prabhupada's saying in this purport, Anyabhilashita Shunyam. So that would be my advice to somebody.
Just in addition to that, can you repeat your question, please? Just so I.
Sometimes we might have a very strong desire, and we might become upset or lament, and even though we might practice devotional life, like there's different levels of bhaktis. So how do we deal with that?
Tolerate. You said something about tolerate. You just tolerate it and it goes away.
Oh yeah. I was saying that that if you just tolerate something, then eventually it's going to go away. Like an example of Chitraketu, if he didn't continue, if he just tolerated not desiring to have a son, then the desire might just go away. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I mean, obviously there's a that's our philosophy, we should tolerate, right? We have to tolerate many things. But there's tolerating, and then there's a point where you're tolerating, but it's not really working, or you could say it's not really your nature. Like if you're saying, oh, you just keep on trying to, sometimes, I don't know, I've seen brahmacharis, just for example, I mean, not talking about anybody here, but brahmacharis in the past, they have this, they're just tolerating their desire for whatever, family, and for these different types of, you could say, experiences, right? And they're tolerating, but then at one point it's just like, then they move out because they can't tolerate it anymore. But in a number of cases, I actually found that they were much better people or better devotees after doing that, because it wasn't really their nature to be a brahmachari, but by nature, they needed to do that. So then you say, and that's just one example, though there's many things you could tolerate. But I was just going to say that, yeah, we tolerate, but then it's a question, okay, is it our nature? Is it not our nature? Maybe to do a particular service or to do something in our life, right? So therefore, we always stress over and over and over and over again in the books and the lectures, and right, this idea of guidance, to accept guidance from not just one's guru, but the scripture and the saintly people, and we always have to be guided. That's what to be humble means, to be guided, and devotee is by nature humble, right? But anyways, I was going to ask you, so that was just an addition to what you're saying.
I just wanted to say one thing. Sorry, I think I misunderstood your question, because I was answering because I thought you were saying, I think you said sometimes we meet people who, so I thought you were talking about like materialists. So I was answering in relation to like a materialist. But yeah, Balaram Prabhu's answer was yeah.
You were talking about how was it? There's just suffering, right? The material. I heard that one before.
Me too.
I'm just joking. I've heard it many times, but so we accept that, right? Now another statement, you have this statement which generally you don't hear, and if you do hear, it's coming from one devotee, Prabodhananda Saraswati, that wherever he looks, it's just happiness. Mm-hmm. The whole world, because he's got he received Lord Chaitanya's mercy. Mm-hmm. So can you just balance those statements where Krishna says it's just a temporary place full of suffering, and then you have Prabodhananda Saraswati who's just seeing happiness. It's Vishram Purna Sukhaita, wherever he looks, there's just happiness.
Yeah. So yeah, there's different. there's different levels of devotees. So there's the Kanishta Adhikaris. There's the who are they don't have very firm faith. There are basically two factors that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes in relation to the qualification of a devotee. So for the Kanishta Adhikaris, this is basically the level of their faith and their ability to argue according to Scripture. So for the Kanishta Adhikaris, they don't have very firm faith. They have shaky faith. They're able to be influenced, and also naturally they're not very expert in Shastric argument. And then there's also the Madhyama Adhikaris, and there's also different symptoms for these different things too. There's the Madhyama Adhikaris who have firm faith, but they're not completely expert in Shastric argument. And then there's the Uttama Adhikaris who have absolutely firm faith, like completely firm faith, unshakable faith, and who are also very expert in Shastric argument. And it's not black and white, of course. Uttama Adhikaris manifest different things sometimes. And so another qualification of the Uttama Adhikaris is that they see Krishna everywhere, and that they actually don't even, to them, they see Krishna's energy everywhere, and because Krishna's energy is spiritual, they basically feel like they're in the spiritual world. So when they're seeing the living entities, they're not seeing the conditioned living entities. They're actually seeing how all these living entities are eternal servants of Krishna, and therefore it's often emphasized that they don't really feel a need to preach because they feel like everybody's already a devotee. So Prabodhananda Saraswati, my understanding is that he's speaking from that platform, and because he's on that level and he's seeing Lord Chaitanya's mercy spreading throughout the whole world, and he's seeing that everybody's a devotee of Krishna, then for that reason he's saying that he sees happiness everywhere. Another way to balance it is that also Prabodhananda Saraswati also says some really heavy things about the material world. For example, in Chaitanya Chandramrita, which that verse is from that you quoted, there's some really seriously heavy statements about the material world, and not even just about the material world, even about other incarnations of Krishna. He says things like, what was the use of lifting some hill? What is the use of lifting the earth out of, what's the use of killing all the kshatriyas? What's the use of all this, Lord Chaitanya, he came and he gave mercy to all the conditioned souls. So even Prabodhananda Saraswati himself acknowledges that there's a good amount of suffering in this material world. So he's seeing the happiness all around him in relation to the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, rather than the fact that the material world is actually a happy place.
All right, thank you. One devotee heard talking about this verse from Prabodhananda Saraswati. He said that for a devotee, they see, and you also don't have to be Uttama Adhikari to.
Yeah, that's true.
To what I'm about to say. I mean, you don't have to be an Uttama Adhikari to think like this. But the devotee says this one person who was saying how, in relation to this verse of Prabodhananda Saraswati, that a devotee looks around and they see all different types of opportunities for service. Happy opportunities for service. And this way, it's the whole world's full of so many service opportunities, which
that's nice.
Brings natural joy to the soul. Because how many souls are out there without Krishna consciousness? That's a lot of opportunity for service, right? Book distribution, Govardhan and Dvijamani go to the same park practically every day. Whatever, that's your choice. But nice you're doing that. But it's like they're going to the same park every day and they just keep on meeting people, giving them Krishna consciousness. So about this here and there, I was thinking about it because Prabhupada would speak like this, and scriptures also do speak like this. Like, okay, there's demons and then there's devotees. And then sometimes you're thinking, all right, well, I don't know, what am I? Am I a demon or what? It doesn't seem like I'm a devotee, or what is he? He's definitely a demon. But it's interesting because at least in one place I'm thinking of, because sometimes you wonder, okay, well, is there some in between somewhere? there is one place in Krishna book in the beginning of, I think it's introduction, but says that, okay, Prabhupada says that there's conditioned souls, there's those who are trying to become liberated, and then there's liberated.
Mm-hmm.
So he gives these three. So, all right, well, I'm trying to become liberated, right? So anyways, it's I always thought that was encouraging. Although, yeah. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
1 second, Vijay Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, Druvada Prabhu has a...
Yes, I can wait.
I just, this Vishnu Purna Sukayate, I always wondered about that. And now I'm thinking, it seems like it could be from the position of Prahlad. Prahlad himself, I have no problem. Anywhere I am, I can always chant your glories and dive into an ocean of bliss. But he's very empathetic to all of the people who are suffering. So in that sense, he's responding, Shocheta Dova Mukacheta Niyata. So I think that may be what Prabhu Nana is referring to. That as far as I'm concerned, even in the most difficult situation, I can still see an ocean of happiness because it's there in my heart and I can chant you. But after all, this is describing someone who's received the mercy of Lord Chaitanya's glance and been empowered. So what does that mean? I mean, it means you're ready to preach. You feel the urgency of that. So you are empathetic to people suffering, and in that sense, you're also feeling some anxiety for all of the suffering going on. So it could be that on that perspective also.
Yeah,
that's part of it.
Janvi Mataji.
We only have one mic.
Oh, there's one right there.
Hare Krishna. Just in regards to the question about tolerating when somebody has desires, even on the devotional path, one time my Guru Maharaj was telling me that sometimes we have to, or actually often, we have to really look at ourselves and we have to use our intelligence to sometimes make adjustments in our life. So if things aren't going well, we have to constantly kind of look within and see, where did I go wrong? What do I need to do? How can I make an adjustment to put myself in better association or have, consultation with who would be the right person, who's confidential, who I can take shelter of to help me through this. So it's important because in our whole life of devotional service, we're going to have so many opportunities or problems to figure out, like, how can I do better, and keep trying to advance on the path. So I just wanted to share that my Guru Maharaj had mentioned that once. Just really use our intelligence to look at how can I adjust my life so that I can be in a stronger, position. So that was just a little.
Thank you. Vijay Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Amogha Prabhu, I do have a question, but Maitreya Prabhu is here. Maybe he wants to go first.
Hare Krishna, I'm enjoying
Hare
the
Krishna.
discussion. Please go right ahead.
Yes, Maitreya Prabhu, thank you very much. You're most kind. Amogha Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams. Prabhu, do you mind reading the last sentence of the translation?
I don't.
Again, please.
Okay, here we go. Therefore, one should not lament over the artificial relationship of parenthood, which is ultimately controlled by the Supreme Lord.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is the exact quote. So, based on this quote, in order for me to present my question, I need to say the following. I think that you know better than me that, related to what is being chanted by Lord Krishna to Arjuna in his Bhagavad Gita, he chants that the mode of ignorance makes you mad.
Yes.
The mode of passion makes you miserable. And the mode of goodness elevates you, uplifts you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mode of pure goodness gives you prema. So In relation to the very last part of the quote you just recited again, which is, quote, which is ultimately controlled by the Supreme Lord. My exact question is, when a couple goes for procreation of children, is it that if the couple procreates the children being covered by the mode of ignorance, a child covered by madness will manifest? Is it that if the couple procreates being covered by the mode of passion, a miserable child will manifest? And is it that a couple producing children while being covered by the mood of goodness will get an uplifted child in the spiritual sense? And the final question related to this sequence, is it that if a couple goes for the producing of children while being blessed by the mode of pure goodness, is it that the Premi Bhakti is going to manifest? That is my question. And this is all related to the Lord having the ultimate control related to the artificial relationship of parenthood. So
Yes.
that is my question.
Okay, thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
So there's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam that says, Karmana devanetrena jantur deho papate striya prabhishta udaram pumsa reta kanashreya. So that verse says that according to a living entity's karma, which is controlled, or which the you could say the doling out of which is controlled by the Supreme Lord. The soul takes shelter of the seed of a particular father, and eventually is put into the womb of a particular mother. So although that can happen, and I don't know if I mean, you could say it generally happens that the father and mother have a child which is kind of like them. We also see that people who you could say are born in a sattvic or kind of family, they may go astray. They get into all kinds of trouble, or they have a kid who's just like really, like my parents would often, Yes, like some of Prabhupada's children. Prabhupada, of course, was a pure devotee, Shakti Vaishavatar, and his children themselves weren't really so interested in Krishna consciousness. And I was going to say, my father specifically, he used to tell me that he said, I don't know who you take after. And they were always trying to figure out who I was like, I don't know, where like my particular modes of material nature are coming from. The answer is yes and no. Ultimately, it's up to, like this verse is saying, it's up to the Lord, and it's up to the material energy to arrange a situation according to the different living entities' karma. So one may be in the mode of ignorance, but due to some pious activity, in the past, or something like that, then their karma somehow or other it's arranged that in this life they beget a very good son. So it's ultimately up to Krishna's arrangement and the material energies arrangement. Like this the purport saying, because of the blessing of Angira Rishi, a child was sent by the grace of Maya. So it's all by the grace of Maya. And there's something else I was going to say. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and the answer you just gave to my question inspires me to very quickly say the following.
Oh.
Prahlad Maharaj,
Yes.
he did take birth in the family in an Asuric family, in the family of Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu, the king of demons, the best king of demons.
Yes.
He was his father.
Yes. Thank you. That was a good example.
So when you say to my question, yes and no, I totally accept it, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Jai, Hare Krishna. Okay, I'm sorry it's so late, but Grantharaj Mahabharata, do you have something? Okay. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Maitreya Prabhu, did you have a question?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Okay.
I did have one quick thought that Krishna, it says he's the Suhridam Sarvabhutanam, the best, dearest friend of everyone, and he gave us all the propensity to enjoy. So it's not that we're not allowed to enjoy. We're supposed to enjoy. That's why we exist. But it's how we enjoy. That's the key.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu.